Hey, how you doing, everybody? My name is Jonathan McHardy. I'm a kinesiology exercise science major. I'm a senior at Southeastern University. The interview I'm conducting today is going to be for sports psychology, primarily focused on getting inside the mind of an athlete. Now, for this athlete, I didn't want to choose an athlete who is a traditional one, primarily being, in the football realm or baseball, but more so of shining light on the bodybuilding scene and those athletes that can be in that sport. The reasoning for this is because I feel like there's not a lot of light shined on these athletes and really the psychological aspects that they have to endure throughout their sport. In traditional team sports, you're going to have a lot of athletes that are having a larger support group, primarily being their team. Within the bodybuilding realm, at the very end of the day, it's going to be that individual person stepping up on the stage and performing their sport. So there's not a very huge support group for that reason. I thought of nobody better to bring on than my previous coach. I've been in the bodybuilding realm for, fairly just touching the scene, but it gave me a great depth to the understanding of really how much of a psychological element there is to this sport. So without ado, I'll let him introduce himself and a quick background of who he is and where he came from.
My name is Tate. I'm 48 years old. Been bodybuilding since 1993. I've been competing since 94 to 2014, so a good 20 years of competing as far as my bodybuilding career goes. I'm still very active in the sport as far as training and staying on my diet and being diligent with macro and micronutrients and such forth. But my wife and I have Tate Fitness, so we're coaches and we coach nationally and internationally. And as Jonathan said, I was his coach as well for one of the contests that he just previously did. But yeah, moving forward, I'm excited to be on this thing with you here, Jonathan. So
yeah, honestly, thank you so much, Troy, for joining me. Like I was saying, I mean, there's just so much expertise that you have behind you, and nobody else better to really do this interview with on this subject. So I really want to touch on a specific goal that you had, or just some type of adversity that was maybe a turning point in your career that really defined you who you were, or maybe just you're competing in totality. Whatever you really want to touch on, just let us know what that is.
Well, I mean, just going professional in bodybuilding, which I won the Masters Nationals in 2013. That was just a huge achievement and goal of mine from the get-go, starting bodybuilding when I was 19 years old. And for the audience, those out there that are new into the sport, back in the 90s and early 2000s, there was no classic physique division. There was no men's physique. There was only bodybuilding. So if you didn't fit that criteria for a certain weight class or look for your height, you weren't going to be competitive. So needless to say, it took many, many years of training and being formidable to the sport and being dedicated to finally get that pro card. And it didn't come easy for me. That was the biggest obstacle I can say is sticking in there doing 29 contests and going pro in my 28th show, and then I ended up doing only one pro show in the 212s, which was in 2014. But needless to say, Jonathan, there's many years where I didn't think I was going to go pro because it was so difficult for going professional.
Where did your motivation come from? Would you say at the start it was intrinsic motivation, something from an inner desire for yourself, or was it extrinsic motivation, some type of outside factor that was driving you for this motivation, to go pro, or just bodybuilding in general?
Well, I can speak for other people too. Back in the 90s, we were motivated by the IFBB pros at the Olympia level and from the magazines, because there was no social media back then. In fact, there was no internet until 97, 98. So you want to go back to 93, 94, we were inspired by the guys in the magazines. And it was hard to get that inspiration at a local gym just by looking at guys with developed body parts, unless you saw a complete physique, then you knew that person was, probably doing something diligent and he actually knew what he was doing, But we looked up to Flex Wheeler, guys like Sean Ray, Kevin LeBron, Dorian Yates, Ronnie Coleman later, these are the guys that we looked up to. Yeah, not to say that we could get to that level where they're at, but we inspired to become like them and train like them and kind of follow the suit, so to speak, So
following that, the training, not many people know if you can just the training alone, because the diet aspect and everything else, it's literally such a controlled environment. But if you could just go in depth, the training compared to, people don't understand the traditional sports training versus bodybuilding training. How much more strict is it? You're caring about muscle contraction and quality, so much more than what it is with a traditional sport.
Well, with exercise physiology per se, there's certain biomechanics that your own body can perform with what kind of leverage you could have, or what kind of sports performance training vector of output that you can put into that gym in that time frame of window, say hour or 2 hours that you have to train. I believe I go back from the old school days where you train heavy, you do as much as you can with full intensity and keep your volume smaller. And that was kind of the approach that I did in the beginning of bodybuilding. Obviously, later down the road, if you have injuries and you're trying to learn more about hypertrophy, it's not always just about lifting the heaviest, weights in the gym, because that's more power lifting. But we kind of did power bodybuilding, if that makes any sense.
100%.
To where we would stick with the compound exercises like squats, deads, and bench press, but put the auxiliary movements like your dumbbell exercises, your machines, and kind of did a combination of hammer strength and all that kind of thing, and make sure we did enough volume to get enough blood into the muscle and break down the body for hypertrophy. But then we made sure to go heavy. When I say we, it's the guys that I trained with, because that's all I knew at 19, 20 years old. You know what I mean? So, for example, would be like 15, not even that, 12 to maybe 14 sets of body part.
Yeah.
And to a lot of people, that's very little volume. That's not a whole lot of sets,
Exactly. You can just see how in depth, really bodybuilding training is compared to the traditional training. Obviously, they're going for two different things, but I mean,
right.
The focus and the intensity is unmatched. And on top of that, I wanted to touch on, what about the mental aspect, as far as showing up each day and creating that output of training that you had to.
Well, honestly, man, it was always beating your prior lifts and prior goals from the previous week. So progressive overload is how we succeeded in training. And I think, and I'm not saying this for everybody, but most people, if they want to progress, numbers don't lie. If you're adding 5-10 pounds to your bench or your squat or your deadlift, and you're still hitting that 12 rep range, you're improving, you're progressing. Or staying at the same weight, but you added 3 extra reps to your final set, you're still progressing. That's a pure measurement of moving forward. And I mean, it's not always if you're stronger, you put on more muscle, but it's kind of sequenced that way as far as the volume goes and progression goes. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I kind of took that approach. So
was it more so like, this is what I have to do, and because of that, let's go in there and get it done?
Yeah, the psychology behind it's, you have to pep talk yourself before you walk into the gym. In fact, if it was a leg day, I'd be talking to myself all day long before I went and go train. Unless I trained in the morning and had a good workout then the night before I'd be thinking about it.
Yeah.
I never, with psychology, be involved with personal aspect on how my output was going to be for that training session. I never just half-assed it and just went into the gym and thought, okay, what am I going to do today? I already knew exactly, delegating wise, how I'm going to do something, what I was going to execute, what numbers I was trying to shoot for, meaning what am I going to beat from the week prior, So I definitely mentally focused towards that. And I had at least equal what I did the previous week to feel like I did an okay workout. I will always try to beat numbers, but not all the time that's going to always be there.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things as well too is the longevity, as healthy as you can be within the sport, as long as you're able to do it for. Was there ever a time that you ran into, some type of injury or some, something that was substantial that you had to actually, overcome in order to, get to where you were today?
I tore my meniscus in my knee at 20, squatting 495 for reps. So that was the first time I had a major injury. But again, dude, I was pushing the envelope and I was trying to beat numbers, and it's not always the healthiest thing to do.
Yeah.
Is go full intensity and see which you can lift 2 or 3 reps. I don't say that's for everybody, but it's what we believed in, and it's what got me to where I got to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
that's the mindset as well behind. I mean, there's a reason why you are, where you are, and that mental aspect of, pushing yourself, to the extremes like that, That's, definitely a reason why you are where you're at today. When you tore your meniscus at 20, did you, have a, kind of a mental note that, I got to be careful with my body, and that, I mean, I feel the same way too. I'm, 22. I feel, very free, and, until something, is a turning point in my life, like an injury, and then you're like, maybe I'm not invincible.
Well, honestly, if I trained scared or nervous, I definitely wouldn't be where I'm at today with my physique. I never would have gotten a pro card, because I didn't go pro until my 30s. Okay. And talking about injury in 2004, like 9 years later, I tore my groin
Yeah.
squatting again.
Yeah.
So, and it tore really bad to where I had to go to the emergency room.
As far yeah, is and you were talking about your training partners as well too. Your training partners were there. Were they, did you have that throughout your training career, or was that, a certain burst within your life and then it kind of, dwindled away and it was more on you?
It was sporadic. I had training partners and then they flaked and I trained solo. Then I'd go back to training with somebody again and go back to training solo, or I would have an aspiring client that was raising up on the scene that would pay me for training sessions that I also did their prep and their diet for, but they wanted to kind of be my so-called training partner too. So they trained with me,
Yeah.
you
Did you
know,
find that was a help with you with training, or does it not really, add a whole lot to, I mean, there's that aspect that they might push you, but did it really help for you?
it can go really good or it can go sideways on you, is what you're trying to say. Yeah. So
Exactly.
either they can help or they could be a detriment to you to where you'd be better off on your own training, you
Yeah.
know. But being as nitpicky as I wasn't going to let that happen, and I was really good with separating business and friendship when it came down to something like that. And I'd pull somebody off to the side and go, I think you're a great guy. I like you a lot, but you suck when it comes to this kind of shit. Like, I would just be really transparent with them. And as you know already, I'm very transparent. I
100%. Yeah.
don't, I don't
Yeah.
hold back anything, man. If I think something, I'm going to say something.
Yeah.
So if they're doing good, I didn't have to say anything. I just say, hey, tomorrow, 4:30, back day. That's all I'd have to say. And they got it.
Yeah. So following that, I mean, that's one support group that you had. Um, if you could not only touch on another support group that you had, and then I want you to lead it into a question that's, pretty tough. You ever feel like, giving up within the sport of bodybuilding, when you were going through it?
The 2005 Nationals in Dallas, Texas, actually 2004, and I'm going to conclude onto this why I'm bringing that competition up. I got 16th place at my first nationals after taking third at the junior nationals, which is a big contest too. And I went up a weight class and I was devastated, Jonathan. I was crushed after not even making in the top 15. Basically, I did quarter turns and some poses and I was done. That was my nationals. There was no finals. There was no getting represented at finals. There's no night show. Basically, I was done. And I thought to myself, is this worth it? Do I want to continue a sport that I'm failing this bad at? But I just learned from my failures, and learned how to fail better, basically, and told myself, no, Troy, the only way you're going to really fail is if you quit, you know? So it was a long weekend, put it that way, of not sleeping and doing a lot of soul searching from that loss, from that contest.
Would you say that? Yeah, yeah, I know it 100% makes sense. Would you say the motivation was just something that, from within you, that, hey, this is a part of it. This is, the learning curve. I mean, I can't even imagine, the mindset then, but what you were saying. But, what did you do to get yourself out of that low point? I know you said the sleepless nights and things like that. Was there something that, you used to get out of that?
Yeah, well, as every competitor would know, if they don't place as well as they should, and I think you know what I'm talking about, you have to do a lot of thinking. And as soon as you get some, and I don't mean this personally, Jonathan, that's not a stab at you. I'm sorry.
No, I love it.
I was trying to be kind of like indirect here.
No, you're good.
But long story short, after you get some calories back in you and you feel a little bit more like you again, you can give really good reflection on something, and I'm not somebody to make a heinous, fast overnight decision on something, and switch gears like that. Like, I didn't do well, so screw this, I'm done. I don't quit anything I start, and I told myself, hey, hang in there. maybe you didn't peak correctly, maybe you didn't do something right, or maybe you didn't listen to your coach enough. There's a lot of things that
there is.
you know what I mean, that could have been probably better on my end, and it all came to fruition after that weekend and after I got some calories back in me.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I had this this thought as well too, just very briefly, but I'm sure you've had it as well. When you were, when you look back before training, and you're just in that mindset of where you were at then, did you ever think that this is what you would be doing, when you were, in your youth? Did you ever think that this is, how far you'd come with it to the pro level?
No, actually, I wasn't sure. When I first got into bodybuilding, I liked it, but it's really hard to give yourself a 10, 15, 20 year, 30-year projection on anything. Yeah, that's almost, I mean, you can have the aptitude towards thinking that you're going to do something for a long time, but whether you're going to really do it or not. I know so many people who fell out of bodybuilding in this sport, like early on, and I've seen a lot of clients really act gung-ho and get a little too excited too quickly, which makes me nervous for them. Because I think, dude, you're not going to hang in there because you're overcompensating already about how everything's so phenomenal and so great so quickly before you even step foot on a stage, So not to use clients as examples, but like for instance, he hasn't even done a show and he's talking about what pro show he's going to do once he goes pro. And I'm like, dude, you haven't even stepped foot on a stage show yet. So these are, to me, warning signs that you're not going to make it. You're probably going to end up not ever even competing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, no, keep going.
Those are the things I didn't do, Jonathan. I didn't go, okay, I did my second show. When I do the Olympia, I'm going to be top 5. There's no way I even thought that far ahead.
Yeah. And
I thought of like, it'd be cool to have 20-inch arms one day, or it'd be cool to like have a physique that's flawless, that just matches perfectly symmetry wise, or have the best posing up there. Like I thought of little things I can work on to make that much better of a physique for myself,
Yeah. Tell me about the competing aspect. I mean, you have the one training, the whole training aspect behind bodybuilding, but tell me about, stepping on stage and competing. Did you ever, were you confident at first of being on stage? And did you ever think, that you would transition your weight training into bodybuilding in the competitive realm?
Well, honestly, I got into bodybuilding to compete.
Okay.
So if that answers your question, yeah. And I did judo for 18 years competitively up until 23. Obviously, I started bodybuilding before I ended my judo career. But in high school, I was a springboard diver. I did 3-meter. So long story short, again, when I went to college in 1992 in Colorado, there was no diving team. In fact, they yanked all the springboards out of the diving facility. So I'm like, damn, I can't even do my diving. This sucks, And the judo team here, they suck too. So I'm not going to learn anything from them, So it's like being the smartest person in the room. You got to find another room, right? Yeah. So I was honestly looking for something active to do. And I met some friends that were in bodybuilding, and they're like, hey, you should get into bodybuilding. Shit, my little light went out.
Did you have any problems competing though? No problems with, especially at pro level and the crowds got bigger, or just, I know there's no actual physical, contact between, competitors, but what about that, presence just being on stage?
As far as like, what do you mean?
As far as, confidence, just overall confidence on stage, and, or just any anxiety, anything like that you had, or you didn't face any at all?
No, I didn't feel anxious or anything because I competed so much in judo,
Exactly. Yeah.
So I was so used to being in front of a crowd and being on the mat and battling away with this one guy that I had to beat, and exactly. I did that since I was 6. So,
and that was physical contact. So, I mean,
physical contact. Yeah. And my dad was my judo instructor. So I was kind of like made to do judo, if that makes any sense. So,
yeah. And I just want to touch on, so what are you doing now, as far as the fitness realm, if you want, to tell the audience, what you're doing now, and then how are you staying focused now as well, through whatever means?
It's credibility, to you guys that are my clients. So, and the message that I'm trying to put out there, so I'm trying to keep up with what I'm doing for as long as I can, like basically go until the wheels fall off, so to speak, Yeah. So if I can continue this training and continue to work around small injuries that I might have and keep this physique up, then the better representative I can be as a coach to you guys. and my clientele. And it's my work, it's my business. This is how I pay my bills, is being a coach, and I'm always going to continue bodybuilding, whether I compete or not. I'm always going to live the lifestyle and be as accurate as I can with it, if that makes sense. So,
yeah. And for those who don't know, just from, not only does your, client pictures and your whole stage, presence, everything like that speak volume, but as well as, you don't see a whole lot of, former pros, are just, bodybuilding gurus basically putting out their information for everybody to see and, really educating the population. And I know we've talked about this before that, you didn't even have the internet and, all these different, resources that people have now. It's more of a detriment than it really is helpful because, for every one subject, there's about 100 other, viewpoints on that subject.
Right.
Yeah.
I basically read magazines and books, and I would go to, I don't know if you know what Barnes and Noble is, but yeah, I'd go to a Barnes and Noble and I'd look at the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding from Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And, the book's like, 10 inches thick, literally. So I'd read that front to cover and take a notebook and take notes out of it. So instead of buying the book and being lazy and having to collect dust, I'd make myself write things out and workout wise and just kind of study the theory of what Arnold and how he believed, or at least what the book said. I don't know if it's exactly what Arnold really portrayed, but that's all we knew. That's all we can kind of go off of. And then you kind of mimic things, you know what I mean? You kind of seek help from things that's already been done in that aspect. So that's what we did. We just kind of tried some of his workouts and his training and some of his diets and kind of put it to fruition and see how it worked. We're talking, dude, when I'm 19 years old. Like I didn't know any better,
Yeah.
And back in the early 90s, it wasn't like there's all these coaches around. And where do you get access to these coaches? It's more like that dude looks pretty big. He might know something, or he's got big legs, so he probably knows a lot about leg training.
Yeah.
And then whether that guy will talk to you or not and be cool with you, that's a whole nother story, because you don't know what kind of attitude you're going to get, or if he's a really nice guy or not. So you just had to have the guts and the balls to actually go up to somebody and see if they're formidable and see if they're nice enough to actually, give you the 5 minutes of time without bugging them too much. That's how we got our knowledge.
Exactly.
There's no internet. So books or the real person that you see in front of you. That's all we had to go off of.
Yeah, completely different from now. I just want to one last subject with you. So I'm pulling from my sports psychology class. We're just going over one theory. This one's called the inverted U principle. It's just basically talking about arousal. Arousal could mean literally anxiety or anything like that. And then how arousal basically affects performance. So if you have low arousal, you usually will have low performance. If you have too high of arousal, it'll also diminish your performance as well. And just to show you what this looks like, this is it right here. It's the inverted U principle, as you can see. So what it's basically saying is that, right at the top of the arc in the center, that's where the sweet spot is. That's where arousal is perfect. That's where your performance is going to be, is going to go right in line with that. If you could just touch on, what this might, how this applied to you. And it could be not even from a competing aspect. It could be from, a mental aspect of how you had to, basically keep in check your psychological aspect. That way your performance stayed steady.
I was always pretty calm and collective, yet I was focused at the same time to where I won't call it performance anxiety. Like I never really got anxious, but nervous enough to where I took it serious enough to where I was mentally prepared for something, if that makes sense.
Yes, it definitely does.
So I never got psyched out, but I never thought, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. And I'm like so relaxed where I'm half asleep. It wasn't like that, So
Yeah.
I'd say somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
to where I was nervous, but serious, to where I was confident. Every contest I prepared for, I always felt like if anybody can win this contest, it's me.
100%. That's what I was going to say too. Nowadays we have social media that's such a big player. And, people searching up, the lineup and who's going to be in this show and that show. I'm sure you had, a core group of guys that that knew what that were going to show up to particular shows. But I feel like, nowadays, people get too caught up in, oh, what's he look like at this amount of weeks out and things like that. And that high arousal can also mess up performance as well, or chasing, something that they're doing that might not be good for you,
that messes up a lot of people. So, you know, you got to stay clear of it in my aspect, you know, of things. Anything that's going to give you negative anxiety. I guess I can use that word, right? Negative anxiety. It's not really what you're saying, but
Yeah.
If you're not using social, whatever platform or vector that you have, if it's not going to help you, don't use it.
Yeah.
Stay away from it, you know? So we all have our things that I could say is like our demons or things that might bother us towards something, towards the optimal goal, right? Because you want to get from A to B. That's your goal. What's going to get you to A to B the most efficiently? And if there's certain things in your life or certain people or certain anxieties, like you're mentioning with performance, that's going to hinder you, eliminate those things.
100%.
At least for that 12 or 15 weeks out when you're prepping, you know, you can't get rid of them completely out of your life, like family members or something like that. You know what I mean? Exactly. But you can say, hey, I got this contest. Please let me. If you get respect from people or your family respects you, or that certain person in your life that's nagging on you, whatever it is, they should leave you alone for that time being, you know?
Exactly.
Or certain friends that don't help by sending you pictures of people like, hey man, this guy's in your show. He's shredded, man. I don't know about him. Like that doesn't help, dude. That doesn't help at all.
Might not be the best person to keep around. Yeah.
No, not at all. And if they keep doing it, then they're being deliberate. It's on purpose, you know?
Yeah.
So
that was the last topic I want to go over. So that was the sports psychology project of getting the mind of an athlete